Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Disaster Recovery for Secure Virtualized Environments with Veeam. This webinar has been sponsored by eSynergy Solutions and WTG. My name's Adele and I head up the community team here at eSynergy. We specialise in open source and cloud resourcing. So if you are looking for a new opportunity, we can help you find the right role tailored to your skills and experience on either a contract or permanent basis. Now, if you are looking to build out your team, we can also help with hiring and attracting top talent. Alongside this, we can also help you with upskilling your employees around the latest open source and cloud technologies. Now moving on to some housekeeping. If you have any questions throughout the talk, please do fire them over via the questions box, and Josh will answer these at the end of the talk. We are recording the session and the slides and recording will be made available and sent to you tomorrow by email along with our contact details. So now I'm going to pass over to Josh, who will begin the talk. Many thanks.
Thanks, Adele. Hi, welcome to this WTG webinar, aimed to give you some guidance around disaster recovery and backups for secured virtualized environments using Veeam products. My name is Josh Walden, and I head up the Windows and virtualization at WTG. I'm joined by Philip Moore from Veeam, who will be giving you some more in-depth overview of some Veeam product solutions available. We've come together as WTG work closely with Veeam to assist a number of secure government organizations. We are security cleared to SC and MPPV level 3 and have experience in creating disaster recovery and backup plans for secure organizations. You may be joining this webinar having recently already gone through a virtualization exercise, or you may be planning to in the future. Whatever your virtualization situation, I've found it can often be confusing as to what backup solution to implement or how to create a disaster recovery plan suitable for the needs of the business. In my experience, it is too common for backup solutions and DR plans to be an afterthought, and I'm frequently approached to rapidly implement both of these things after a virtualization exercise has already been completed. As we'll be making a lot of comparisons to legacy and virtualized environments throughout the webinar, we have coded the slides orange for legacy discussions, purple for virtualized discussions, and later on, we'll also discuss the Veeam product in more depth, and these will be coded in green. So for the webinar today, we'll be following this agenda. Firstly, we'll take a look at how legacy hosting and traditional backup solutions work, followed by a simple explanation of how virtualization works. We'll be covering off the limitations and problems with legacy backup solutions and how one built around virtualization differs. We will then take a look at the Veeam products and how they can help you. Finally, we'll cover up some security aspects and finish with a Q&A session. So, when I've been approached about migrating a legacy hosting environment into a private cloud, I'm commonly asked, can we use our existing backup solution? This was asked recently during a consultation with one of our government secure clients who had made the mistake of leaving their backup solution to one of their last considerations after finally achieving a full virtual migration to a hosted private cloud solution? Well, the simple answer to this question is yes. But if you've read my blog, then you will know the question that they should have been asking was, should we use our existing backup solution? In order to answer this question, it's important to understand how virtualization can transform legacy environments. Let's look at how legacy hosting and traditional backups usually work. In a traditional private hosting environment, you would have physical servers carrying out certain tasks. For example, a mail server, a database server, and a data server. Each of these servers has its own operating system, software, and data, stored separately from one another. In order to back these servers up, you would need a backup server. For the backup to function, agents would need to be installed on all of the servers, and the servers to be powered on for protection to continue. If a server is off for any reason, it cannot be backed up. In a legacy environment, you would need to manually select the files that you wish to back up and have them transferred over the existing network to the backup server. This task would have been completed out of hours, at times convenient to the business, to avoid performance issues. To protect the data in the backups, encryption would need to be enabled, which can increase performance issues and slow down transfer times. Sometimes setting up secure encryption methods on legacy environments can be confusing and require specialist input. This approach is what I refer to as a legacy or a traditional backup solution. It works well in the legacy or traditional hosting environment, but has restraints when applied to a virtualized environment. So now we have an understanding of legacy environments. Let's look at how a virtual hosting environment is set up. In a virtualized environment, we still have our physical servers, much like the ones we previously would use for our legacy hosting environment. The key difference here is that these physical servers would typically be more powerful to accommodate the larger volume of virtual servers. These physical servers now take on the role of hypervisors, which will form the foundations of our virtual environment. The hypervisors are grouped into a cluster so that their resources can be shared and used to host our virtual servers previously mentioned as our mail server, database server, and data server. Our servers now exist as virtual instances instead of physical ones and can share the same resource pool as many other servers. All of these virtual instances will be stored and operate from a shared storage array attached to our physical hypervisors. So now we understand how a legacy and a virtual environment is set up. Let's look at what happens when you implement your legacy backup solution within your new virtualized environment. The good news is you can use your existing legacy backup solution in the same configuration we had on the legacy servers. This means that agents would still need to be installed on the virtual machines in the same way that they'll be installed on the physical servers. The backup process remains a manual selection of files, which are still transferred over the existing network. The bad news is your legacy backup solution is likely to come across lots of restraints within your new virtualized environment. When the business has invested time, resource, and money into a new virtualized environment, there is often an expectation that server recovery will be much quicker. However, when the backup solution and DR plan isn't adapted for a virtualized environment, it is likely that you will encounter the same recovery problems and similar timescales as virtualization is not utilized to its full potential. Virtualization providers such as VMware and Microsoft, for example, will have high availability services within their products. These services ensure that in the event of a hypervisor failure, the virtual machines remain online by automatically moving to alternative hypervisors with zero downtime. There is sometimes confusion around how the high availability services assist with recovery. The important thing to remember is that this service is critical for a stable virtual environment, but they exist only to protect the virtual servers from hypervisor hardware failures or outages. As powerful and as impressive as high availability is, it isn't designed to recover the server or data held within the operating system. In the legacy environment, we accepted that if a server was to fail and we didn't have a physical server spare, we would need to build a new one or allow a certain amount of downtime while the existing one was repaired or rebuilt. We would also need to allow time while the data was recovered from the backups to the new or repaired physical server. There would be extensive reconfiguration work, and when working on business-critical servers, a lot of pressure to recover the systems for the business as quickly as possible. So will your backups work when you need them most? Recovery tests should have been carried out routinely to ensure your legacy backup solution will work in the event of a failure, and further tests to ensure that the data has been backing up correctly. Sometimes these processes are forgotten, and the only time that you find out they won't work is when you need them the most. In all of these scenarios discussed so far, we've only really explained the issues with backup solutions for data held within the servers. We haven't yet looked at options for backing up the entire server itself. This is possible with a legacy backup solution, although it can have further performance impacts and is often unreliable. This is because any recovery needs to be implemented on a server that is identical to the original. Servers are increasingly becoming always on, and less downtime is expected. Recovery time and point objectives are getting tighter and tighter, which is why we need a backup solution and DR plan that can help. So now that we understand the limitations of a traditional backup solution, let's look at how a product built around virtualization works. The product that I'm going to be giving you an overview of is called Veeam Backup and Replication. This is WTG's preferred backup solution when deploying virtual environments and can be used as part of a disaster recovery plan as well. So let's have a quick overview of the advantages. The first advantage is that server agents are not required. This means that, whereas with your legacy backup solution, you would have to create a server's account and give it permission to access your files in order to function, Veeam doesn't require access to the operating system files in order to back them up. This means that you do not need to create a server's account or additional access permissions, and because of this, you've reduced the risk of systems being compromised. No agents also means servers and files can continue to be backed up if servers happen to be offline for any reason. In order to gain access to the environment to carry out backups, Veeam just needs access to the existing virtual environment's command center. This is called the vCenter in a VMware deployment. From here, Veeam will understand the underlying infrastructure and know where to locate the virtual machine files for backups. Veeam reduces the resource impact of the backup and does not rely on backing up at the operating system file level. Instead, it backs up the virtual machine files directly from the storage array. Veeam can do this by using an isolated network dedicated to the storage for the virtualization platform. With little impact to an environment, it means the backup can run more frequently and with less risk to business operations. Veeam reduces recovery time of failed servers from hours and days to just minutes, or in some situations, seconds. Deploying and ongoing management is much easier with Veeam. Deploying Veeam on top of an existing virtualization platform is straightforward because of its tight integration to the vCenter. It understands the underlying configuration of your platform, whereas a legacy solution would require manual configuration. Ongoing management is accessed via a single portal. This allows a single view of activity and quick access to the status of your platform. So will those backups work now? Well, Veeam Backup and Replication has a feature called Sure Backup. Sure Backup is an automated recovery verification process. Unlike the legacy solution that requires manual restore tests to ensure that backups will actually work when you need them, Veeam verifies the recoverability of every single virtual machine that it backs up. And it does this every time it backs it up. So all of this is great when we want to recover an entire server. But what about when we just want to recover some individual files, or maybe just an email someone has lost? Veeam have taken it one step further, and they've given us even more granular control for applications such as Microsoft Exchange, Active Directory, SQL, and SharePoint. We'll come back to these in more detail in a few minutes, but Veeam is able to query our databases for these applications and browse them to pull out individual files such as emails and database entries using a feature called Veeam Explorer. Obviously, we don't want to have to recover an entire server just for one file. The good news is we don't. Veeam has a feature called VPower. VPower allows us to mount a virtual machine backup from a point in time when we want to access its files. It does this in complete isolation from the original, so it has no impact to the existing servers or operations. When we use VPower, we have a few options to recover our files. We can browse the raw files and download them, almost like we're browsing a USB drive for data. Okay, so that's some of the benefits of using Veeam. Let's look at how it actually works and how this differs from a traditional backup solution. With Veeam, we still have a backup server, but now this is running Veeam Backup and Replication. And on our virtual infrastructure, we have our virtual environment command center. For this example, I will use VMware's vCenter. We also have the storage array that now holds all of our virtual machine files. In order for Veeam to operate efficiently, it needs access to these components on our platform. When we want to back up our servers, Veeam first queries the vCenter to get the information it needs. The Veeam server will then establish a connection directly to the storage array to begin the data transfers. This is a crucial feature because it means that we are using the virtual environment's back-end storage network to accommodate the backup bandwidth, not the company's network, which prevents connectivity slowdowns for the systems still running. So now we have an understanding of how Veeam differs from a legacy backup solution and how it functions. Let's take a look at some of the advantages in more detail. Let's start with the instant recovery features using VPower. Veeam's VPower technology runs a virtual machine directly from a compressed backup file on our backup storage. This eliminates the need to extract the backup and copy it to our live virtual platform storage. We are simply starting the virtual machine from our backup storage. If a VM goes down, you can restart it on any host in a matter of minutes, and users can keep working while you troubleshoot the problem. Veeam's instant recovery feature is like a temporary spare for your VMs. To complete the recovery, Veeam will migrate the VM to the live storage for you, and depending on the method, full recovery can happen in the background with no interruption to service or impact on users. Let's also have a look at Veeam's Sure Backup. Sure Backup allows you to verify the recoverability of your backups, not just a few selected backups, but every backup of every VM. It automates the recovery verification process, uses available resources in the existing production or test environment, and does not affect your backup window. During recovery verification, Sure Backup will create a virtual machine in an isolated environment. It will run the virtual machine from the backup using VPower, start that virtual machine, boot the operating system, and confirm that the applications inside are running normally. So let's take a look at the Veeam Explorer options. As mentioned earlier, Veeam Explorer gives us powerful granular control, so single file recovery is much smoother, faster, and easier. It is now possible to focus on exactly what you need to recover and restore, including individual items directly from your backups. Veeam Explorer is available for the following applications: Microsoft SQL Server. This allows for fast recovery of SQL databases, including agentless backup and replay, so you can restore your SQL databases to a precise point in time and achieve low recovery time and point objectives. Microsoft Exchange. This gives us instant visibility into Exchange 2010 and 2013 backups, advanced search capabilities, and quick recovery of individual Exchange items such as emails and contacts, and online archive mailboxes, and even hard deleted items. Microsoft Active Directory. This allows us to search and restore all of Active Directory object types such as users and groups, and even users and groups and passwords. And Microsoft SharePoint. We can browse SharePoint 2010 and 2013 backups, search for specific SharePoint files, and quickly recover them directly to the original SharePoint server or send them as an email attachment. In addition to Veeam Explorer, we can use the VPower technology to enable recovery of individual objects from any virtualized application on any operating system without restoring the entire virtual machine first. For example, you can recover individual rows and tables from an Oracle database running on a Linux server or individual customer records from a CRM system. So finally, you might be wondering how safe your data is. You may be looking to replicate your backup data to a second site over a WAN, or you may have concerns about the backup data as it travels from your production environment to the backup server. These are all understandable concerns, especially when we're dealing with secure private cloud environments. To mitigate these concerns, Veeam offers end-to-end encryption, allowing you to secure your data via AES 256-bit encryption in 3 different locations: at source, during the backups, before it leaves your network perimeter, in flight as your data is transferred, and at rest, while it includes hardware and software tape encryption. These 3 encryption options provide flexibility with regard to when and where you can leverage encryption. For example, you can leave local backups unencrypted for faster backups and restores, but encrypt off-site backup copies prior to flight or protect different backups with different passwords. During this process, there's no impact to compression or WAN acceleration. And we can handle lost passwords without compromising security. Each backup is encrypted by a randomly generated encryption key. Each key has 2 passwords: the backup job password created by the admin and a public key pushed to all the backup servers. If the original password is lost using a challenge and response system, you can still access your data without sacrificing security. I'm going to hand over to Philip now, who's going to give you an overview of some of the other Veeam products that can be used in parallel with backup and replication to give even further disaster recovery and environment protection.
Thanks, Josh. I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about who Veeam are and how we see availability in the modern data center and some of our core values. So Veeam was founded in 2006, so we're looking at our 10th birthday next year, and we're a truly global company now. We're headquartered in Switzerland, but we have major research and development centres and support centres throughout the world, in the US, over here in Europe, as well as in the Asia Pacific, so we can provide full 24/7 support for you from those centres. We've got over 1,400 employees working directly for Veeam now, split across R&D, support and sales, and we serve an ever-growing number of customers. I think at the latest count, actually, we're on over 150,000 customers. But we've always been looking at solutions built primarily around that modern data center for that virtual environment. So all of our solutions are primarily built around both VMware, which we're talking about today, and Hyper-V. So over the past few years, we've been gradually innovating and iterating the product. So a lot of the features that we've been talking about today are very mature. So VPower Instant VM Recovery, Sure Backup, UAir have been available since version 5. And we've been adding additional features through the years as solutions have been required for those enterprise environments. So as Exchange and SharePoint have been taken up, we've introduced Explorers for those applications. And as we're moving forward, we're continuing to iterate. So the next version, you'll see enhanced replication features, as well as greater support for Veeam Cloud Connect and things like Oracle Explorers as well. Each of the features on this slide highlighted in red were industry first in virtualization. So they're true innovations by Veeam within the availability market. We're the world's leading solution in backing up virtual environments. So we protect over 9 million VMs at the moment in over 200 countries across all industries in the world, right from the small business up until the enterprise, as well as secure environments and those private cloud type of infrastructures. And we've always had a great level of customer support. People are very happy running our solutions. We have some of the highest customer satisfaction indexes in business. We see availability as a combination of backup, disaster recovery, and other availability technologies. And I think really the goal for us is provide you with tools to keep your business up and running and be always on at all times. And to do that, we use 5 key pillars of application availability to make sure the solution meets your needs. So the first of those is to give you high-speed recovery. And we've spoken about some of those features today. So being able to recover a whole VM, an individual file, or an individual application item such as an email within just a few minutes. It's essential to get the users back up and running as quickly as possible. We also think it's important once you've got that data for that to be as consistent and secure as possible. So we include technologies like backup copy jobs and WAN acceleration to be able to move backups around the environment easily, to be able to put them across onto tape, as well as things like encryption technologies to make sure that once we've got a copy of your backups, that they're secure when they're stored on disk or tape. We also think once you've got a copy of that data on disk, it's important that you know that data is guaranteed to be able to recover, and we do that using verified protection, our Sure Backup and Sure Replica technology. So this allows our customers who have traditionally only been able to test their backups, a formal DR test once every year, once every 6 months, being able to do those sort of automated DR tests after every backup window using Sure Backup and Sure Replica. And we also believe they should be able to use their availability solutions for more than just backup and replication. We should be able to use that data to do more in the environment. And through our virtual lab functionality that we use for Sure Backup and Sure Replica as well, we can do things like patch testing, training, spin up those virtual machines in protected bubbles using a backup environment without risking the secure production environment. So it gives you really an extra tool in your tool chest to be able to do some of those things that are normally impossible in those production environments. And those first four pillars, they're very much in the sphere of backup and replication, but we also believe that there's a final pillar, which is visibility. So not just being able to react when things happen with the environment, when you lose a file, when you lose a server for whatever reason, but be able to start to predict those problems before they come to fruition in the environment. And we do that using some of our other tools, which I'm about to talk to in more detail in a moment. So what we're trying to do here is bridge the availability gap between the virtual solutions and the backup environment. So we want to give you access to all of your data, all of the applications at any time, being able to recover any item, no matter if that's a whole VM, a 10 terabyte file server, all the way down to an individual calendar entry in an Exchange email box. We don't have any tolerance for data loss. Once you've got a copy of data or got a copy of backup, you need to know that's secure and recoverable. And probably one of the most important ones, we need an RTO, so that's a recovery point and time objective of less than 15 minutes. What that means is we should be able to back up any service, any server within your environment as often as every 15 minutes or more frequent than that even, and we need to be able to recover that piece of data, however big or small, within 15 minutes as well. So to expand on that final pillar of availability, complete visibility, what we're trying to do is we're trying to look at the virtual environment, and legacy tools really look at just those blue boxes, the application and the operating system layer of the environment. They don't report on the underlying virtual infrastructure and in turn the metal, the servers, the storage, the network resources you have underneath that. So hopefully you'll be looking at backup and replication to protect the application and the VMs themselves on the environment so we can recover them quickly if there is a disaster. But we also want to monitor what's happening in that backup environment and what's happening within those production VMs. And to do that, we have a couple of products. The first being Veeam One. Veeam One is an advanced reporting and monitoring product for virtual environments. It's a standalone product, and it bridges that gap that you can't normally see in legacy reporting and monitoring tools. If you're running Microsoft System Center, and I believe some of you are, we also do a very similar tool, which is a management pack for System Center. So if you've already invested in System Center for your legacy environment and for the OS and application layer, we can augment that with the management pack to give you full visibility all the way from the application right down to the metal. How we provide you with that visibility is by giving you that deeper information on vSphere, on Microsoft's Hyper-V environments, as well as the backup infrastructure itself. So we can pull information from those platforms into the Veeam One server and start to look at what's happening there. The first way we do that is through 24/7 real-time monitoring. So we monitor the environment and tell you what's happening now, which virtual machines are using the memory resources, which ones have open snapshots, all of that sort of thing, and provide you with quick alerts when thresholds are breached. We also, as well as looking at what's happening in the now, look at what's happened in the past to help us make better decisions about what's happening in the future. So as well as those monitoring tools, we're also going to give you in-depth reporting tools to capacity plan the growth in your networks to make sure you're using those resources that you've invested in effectively. We provide you with great information out of the box, but Veeam One is fully customizable, so you can customize your own reports, your own documentation to react on within your own SLAs and your own requirements. So how do we do that within Veeam One? And most of these bullet points are true in the management pack as well. So the first, we're using that 24/7 monitoring and alerting. So we're monitoring against things like data store usage, how much space you're using there, whether your memory is running out on specific hosts or inside VMs, whether your disk space is running inside those VMs. We can also report on the backup environment. So with 25 customizable backup reports, you can run a report on a group of your infrastructure and say, I have an SLA of 2 days. I need a backup within 2 days for that to satisfy my RPO objective. On running that report quickly, you can see those servers that fail on that RPO. So they're very advanced reports we provide for backup through Veeam One. We also use infrastructure assessment tools to make sure you're using your backup environment as effectively as possible, that we're utilizing those network loops you've got between sites and your backup storage effectively. We can also model against disaster. So if you're going to lose something like a host within your VMware environment, and you want to see how many of those hosts you can fail without losing production services, we can do that as that sort of what-if report. Fully multi-tenanted, so we'll reflect any security that you set within your vCenter into the Veeam One tool, so the right teams can see the right data at the right times. Veeam One is great out of the box. We include over 200 pre-sale alarms that you can model and see what's going to happen in your environment in advance, so we can really start to flag up a lot of problems within your environment before they start to affect end users. As I've mentioned, it's fully customizable, and we've even got a custom report builder that allows you to build the right reports for the right user groups so they can see quickly all of the resources as they pertain to them. And finally, we've got some easy health and performance dashboards that you can provide to key people within the business so that they can see quickly whether their backups have been successful, whether they're utilizing their resources effectively. Truly any metric available in vCenter we can provide as an easy web-based dashboard for the user. So by using Veeam One All Management Pack and Veeam Backup and Replication together, we believe that provides a true availability solution, protecting you against things before they happen, as well as allowing you to react to problems after they've happened. And so we sell them as a bundle as part of Veeam Availability Suite. So thank you very much for your time. I'm going to pass back to Josh now.
Thanks very much for that, Phil. So if you're interested in understanding how you would implement a Veeam backup and DR plan, you need to consider a few things first. Firstly, understanding your platform is key. What are its restraints? What are your areas of weakness with security and encryption? It's important to understand the dependencies on business operations. For example, are you restricted on when you can run your backups? Virtualize. So if you haven't done so already, you need to plan and execute virtualization of your platform. WTG can assist with the planning of this with you and provide guidance on your approach to carry out some of the heavy lifting. What are your requirements? Is Veeam right for you? Understanding the needs of the business and level of security required around your data will impact your approach to creating a virtualized backup and DR plan. For example, you may need to include an off-site backup solution in your plan or consider a full disaster recovery site altogether. Build your DR plan. As you've already understood your requirements, you now need to feed these into your DR plan suitable for your business. This will determine to what extent you need to deploy your Veeam product. Plan integration to your existing platform. Deploying Veeam is straightforward, but still requires a good understanding of risks and any legacy application constraints. If full virtualization hasn't been achieved yet, Veeam can work alongside existing legacy platforms if required. So in summary, Veeam has a number of ways of making ongoing management of your platform as straightforward as possible. With the tools available, you're able to give lower end level access to users to carry out recovery tasks without the risk of compromising sensitive data. So we're going to have a short Q&A session now. If you can just bear with us for a few minutes just while we collect the questions that have been sent in, and we'll come back to you.
Lovely, thanks Josh. Well, we'll just hold tight now for some questions, and if you do have any questions, do pass them over via the chat box, which should be available on your screen. Hi Josh, we have had a question come through, so I've just assigned it over to you if you want to take a look.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks for that. So yeah, I'm going to let Phil answer that one. That's not a problem.
Sure. So the question is, does the hypervisor itself need an agent? So does ESX, do we need to install an agent on the ESX iBox or something along those lines? I imagine the question is. And the answer is no. So with Veeam, we know what a virtual data store looks like and what a disk looks like on that data store. And VMware has provided us with some very nice APIs to be able to take backups. So we're just going to use those, and our proxy servers will use those APIs to initiate snapshots from the disk and all of that great stuff. So we don't need to install anything else on the ESX server. Once we've initiated that backup, we can talk to just the disk itself. So we can read the data directly off the disk without the need for an additional agent installed on that server. I hope that answers that question.
That's great. Thanks, Phil. So there's another question coming there that's related to whether or not Veeam can actually run on a virtual machine. So the answer to that question is yes, it can. There would be some additional configuration work required if you did want to run the backup solution on a virtual machine as opposed to a separate physical server sat alongside your environment. The key thing is there that the virtual machine would need to have physical connectivity out to whatever storage medium you're using. So if you were using, for instance, a secondary storage device, or even if you want to use tapes, that virtual machine would need to be able to communicate with those devices. But apart from those constraints, there's no other constraints about running it on a virtual machine, so that's perfectly feasible.
So we've got another question here about what hypervisors do we support and what versions do we support. Well, we've just released support a few weeks ago for vSphere 6, so all the way up to the latest version of vSphere we support currently. And with Microsoft Windows Server with Hyper-V, it's all the way up to 2012 R2 Hyper-V. So either of those hypervisors we support. I've got a here. So the question here about how Veeam differs from other backup solutions and how we're better than other VMware-enabled backup solutions. And one of the big differences is that we've been around doing this for quite a long time, for almost 10 years now, so there's a lot of maturity in the product. So you've got a lot of other solutions that have basic VMware recoverability, but what you're missing from that are more advanced features. So things like sure backup, being able to verify those backups to make sure that they're going to be able to be recoverable and that you've just not checked the bits and the blocks. The Veeam Explorers, I can't stress how easy it is to pull out an individual email out of Exchange. Now those other solutions, you can restore Exchange emails a lot of the time, but it involves restoring the whole VM first and then mounting those databases. With Veeam, it's a couple of clicks within the interface and you've got that email straight back. So it's being able to recover data quickly and easily, because the last thing that you want to do when you're trying to recover a piece of data is spend 45 minutes or an hour working out how you're going to do it. You want it all available in the interface, quick wizards to be able to pull that data back quickly and simply. I hope that answers that question.
Thanks, Phil. There's another question there as well about what applications can be backed up. That's an interesting one actually, because Veeam doesn't require access to the operating system layer, so it basically doesn't care what applications are actually running at that level, because it's taking a backup at a lower level. It's querying your SAN and your virtual machine files, and it's taking a backup of that entire virtual machine, that it can have any operating system running on it and it can have any application running on it. So if you had constraints previously with a backup solution that couldn't back up an old legacy application for whatever reason, Veeam can resolve that problem as well by virtualizing that old operating system, or virtualizing that old application. and then by default it's then backed up because the whole virtual machine is backed up. So yeah, I think that answers that one there.
Yeah, just to add to that slightly, at Veeam we support any virtual machine OS configuration that's supported by VMware. So as long as it's supported by VMware, we'll support the recovery of an application on that platform.
Brilliant. There's an interesting question there that's come in about, does Veeam have any limitations with recovering certain applications or file servers, basically? It's a good question, and it's one that we've experienced fairly recently, in that we recently had a problem where we were using Veeam to back up some domain controllers, and it became apparent very quickly that domain controllers themselves have an issue with snapshots in virtualization. So although it's not necessarily a limitation with Veeam itself, it's a limitation in virtualization, and that when you're using things like domain controllers that are very reliant on replication with other members and other controllers, that if you're going to recover them from a virtualized backup, you have to be very conscious that sometimes the operating system can interpret its state very differently. So it believes it's older than it is, or it believes it has gone offline for a certain amount of time. Now, in our situation, what happened is this server was, even though it was only a couple of days old, the Active Directory believed it had gone into like a stale state. So it decided to isolate itself in the environment, and it became apparent very quickly after that that there were issues with actually creating any sort of virtual backup for products like domain controllers. So I guess the answer to that question is it's not a limitation of Veeam per se, it's a limitation of virtualization. So it's something I think would need consideration for your environment on a whole. So if you were looking to virtualize products or platforms such as your domain controllers, I would consider how you're going to back those up. If you're going to rely purely on a virtualized backup for those servers, then you may want to consider putting something else in there to back them up as well, if you do encounter the scenario that we had. So yeah, if you want to add to that, Phil, at all.
Yeah, I might slightly disagree as well. But so Active Directory controllers, we don't have an issue backing up, and we can protect them. But as you've said, when you're reintroducing a backed up domain controller that might be a few days old, you've got to be aware of what implications that have, and be aware of the reasons why you're restoring that domain controller. So if you're restoring in disaster, then absolutely we can restore from Veeam. You've lost your entire AD infrastructure, and that would be a scenario where you would recover an entire virtual machine. But if you're restoring a domain controller because it was on a secondary site and it was a few days behind, and you wanted to recover just, say, a group of users on that domain controller, that's where we wouldn't restore the entire domain controller. We'd use something like the AD Explorer to import those computer and user objects. In fact, we're bringing a whole raft of new features into the next version of Veeam to increase the number of scenarios that we can do that sort of subset as so things like group policies we'll be able to restore in the next version of Veeam using that simple wizard.
Brilliant, yeah, sounds like something we should look at as well. There's another question there about trial versions, if there's any trial versions available. I'll let you answer that one, I guess, as well.
Sure, absolutely. We can provide you with trial copies of Veeam. They're fully functional. There's no sort of restrictions on what features you can use. They're just time limited. So as soon as we issue the key, normally we give you a 30-day key that you can try, install in your environment. And in virtual environments, we can even do things like work with just a VM rather than you having to procure hardware in advance to run Veeam.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Phil. Cool. Okay. Well, I think we're coming to the end of the webinar now. So, I mean, if you have any other questions or if you want any more information, then feel free to get in touch. Sorry, there's a slide there with the details there. If you'd like to follow WTG on Twitter, our Twitter handle's there at the bottom. Yeah, so like I say, if you need any more information, if you want to ask any other questions offline, feel free to email me directly. My email's on screen there. So yeah, apart from that, thank you very much for joining this webinar.